Hello everyone and welcome back for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets and drama. So I'm back for another Have Your Say video and this is for season 16 episode 4. And as you know, normally I would be on camera for these videos, but I'm having some trouble with some of my recording software, so I'm having to do just the voiceover this week. So today we're going to be recapping season 16 episode 4, I'll be going through the results of the Have Your Say poll, and we'll be talking about some drama from last week involving Plasma. All of that and more coming up in today's video, so let's get started. Okay, so at the start of the episode, the queens came back into the workroom after Hershey LaCourgetay's elimination, and Q said that she was shocked that she didn't win because she used all unconventional materials, unlike some other queens, and got perfect critiques, whereas Nymphia Wind didn't. And I thought this was interesting because the editors are clearly trying to set up this narrative of Q being close to winning more than just once but not actually winning, I guess a little bit like Jan on season 12, and we'll talk about this part a little bit later. It was also brought up that Plain Jane had read a mandatory meeting during Untucked, and Amanda said that it was unnecessary. Plain Jane apologised and slightly blamed it on the cocktails, but ultimately took responsibility for what she said. But later in a confessional, Plain Jane said it doesn't really matter to her that she and Amanda aren't best of friends, and she said, quote, "let the shade begin." And this has been an ongoing topic in the past few episodes about Plain Jane, with a lot of people saying that she's being mean for no reason, and other people saying that she's bringing good television. So let me know your thoughts about Plain Jane in the comments. So we find out the main challenge for this week is RDR Live, which is a parody of SNL Live, or Saturday Night Live, which is an American comedy show that's performed live. And we already had this challenge on All Stars 8, so this is apparently, quote, back by popular demand. I will say I didn't really understand a lot of the sketches, so I'm not sure if perhaps this is just because I'm not that familiar with SNL. I have seen clips of it and I know what it is, but it's not really that well known in the UK and perhaps not in other countries either. So let me know in the comments, maybe I just missed some of the jokes. So the queens had to choose their roles and also learn their lines, so this was in effect a scripted acting challenge. And in general, I'm not a massive fan of scripted acting challenges on Drag Race because they inevitably end up with only a few characters getting all the funny lines and then other roles just have no funny lines, which feels a little bit unfair. Personally, I prefer the improv challenges where the queens have to write their own lines because I think that just seems a bit fairer. There was obviously a little bit of drama with the queens when it came to assigning the roles, which we've seen quite a lot on Drag Race. They definitely set up this narrative that because Mirage took on the host position, it was a risk, and if she didn't do well, it would land her in the bottom. And they also set up the narrative that Plasma got a role that she didn't originally want because she thought that it would be too obvious. Okay, so let's move on to the sketches. The first sketch was QNN End of the World Countdown. Xunami Muse played Randerson Cooper and Morphine Love Dion played Brandy Cohen. And this is of course a parody of Anderson Cooper and Andy Cohen, who are two TV personalities who host the New Year's Eve Countdown, which is broadcast on the CNN network. I definitely did get the reference with the names of this sketch, and I'm vaguely familiar with Anderson Cooper and Andy Cohen. Morphine was playing this kind of drunk, slightly ditzy character, whereas Xunami Muse was kind of the slightly more typical professional newscaster. I thought the queens overall did an okay job with their performances. I personally didn't really think the lines they were given were that funny, but perhaps some of the humour was just lost on me, but they didn't seem to have that many actual funny lines. As part of the same sketch, we also had Maya Iman LePage, who played Donna Lemon, which I assume is a pun on the name Don Lemon, who was a former CNN co-host. I thought Maya actually did really well here, and she definitely had the funniest and probably clearest concept of all of the characters, and it's probably the only character from this skit that I found funny. So far throughout the season, we've seen they've tried to set up this narrative that Maya is quite quiet and timid, so it was nice to see her in this episode come out of her shell a bit more. Also, as part of the same sketch, Geneva Carr played Senator Lindsey Graham, which is a parody of the real Senator Lindsey Graham, who is a senator from South Carolina who is part of the Republican Party and is apparently known for being quite conservative. In the skit, they also refer to Lindsay as Lady G. I looked this up, and this apparently comes from a rumour that was started by a gay adult movie star who had made allegations against Lindsey Graham, saying that he had hired male sex workers in the past, and they had given him the nickname of Lady G. And this apparently came about because there's been lots of rumours for years that because Lindsey Graham has never been married, people think that he might be secretly gay, even though his views on LGBT+ issues has been quite questionable. Anyway, I think Geneva said that she didn't really know who Lindsey Graham was, so she probably didn't really get the joke. I think her performance was a little bit flat, unfortunately, but I also think the lines that she was given were also just not that funny. There was a poster of Rebecca Glasscock from season 1 behind her, and I didn't quite understand this reference. I did ask my followers on social media, and some people said it was because of the Lady G reference, and the G could potentially be Glasscock, but I'm not sure. Anyway, the next performance was from Mirage, who was the host of the show. I think that Mirage actually had quite a hard role because her lines were not necessarily that funny, and often when you're the host, you're not necessarily the funny one because you have to set up the jokes for other people and also keep the show going. I do think Mirage seems slightly unsure in her role, and I did think she was perhaps lacking a little bit of confidence, and there was also one slip up with a line, but overall I think she actually did a pretty good job. The next skit was Megami and Plain Jane, who played Connie Thick and Candy Long, who own the Thick and Long Deck service, which sells wooden decks. This is probably the only skit I found quite funny because it was quite obvious what they were supposed to be, these ditzy bimbo women, and there were also lots of innuendos. I thought they both did quite well, and they clearly, in my opinion, had the best lines and the best concepts for the characters. I do agree that Plain Jane did slightly outshine Megami, and she played this kind of brain-dead bimbo character really well. But I also thought that Megami did also do a good job. This skit also was almost exactly the same as the skit from All Stars 8 that Jimbo and Jessica Wilde did for their McCall Girls gardening service. And this leads me on to a general point that a lot of people have been comparing Plain Jane and Jimbo, saying that Plain Jane is copying Jimbo in everything she does. I thought this was interesting, and I did talk about it a little bit in my last Have Your Say video, so make sure you go and check that out. But in terms of this specific performance, All Stars 8 came out in May 2023, which is reportedly when season 16 started filming. So if those dates are correct, it's unlikely that Plain Jane would have even seen Jimbo's performance in that skit in All Stars 8, because the episode hadn't necessarily come out then. But obviously, Jimbo was also on 2 seasons of Drag Race prior to All Stars 8, so some people have suggested that Jane just copied Jimbo before that. Bob the Drag Queen recently said something interesting on his podcast with Monét Exchange about this topic. Although the video seems to have now been deleted, Bob said that in recent years on Drag Race, queens are deliberately being stupid and kind of goofy even if it's not their style, because previous contestants have been praised for that on Drag Race. And so in Bob's opinion, contestants are now changing their drag style to please the judges and do better in the competition. And Bob talked about Plain Jane's song Burger Fingers from the talent show. But let me know in the comments what you think about this topic about queens being compared to other queens and being accused of acting stupid and goofy just to get further on Drag Race. Anyway, back to the skit, and we then had a performance from RuPaul performing her song Lady Cowboy. I thought this was a fun performance, and we don't often get to see RuPaul perform, so this was quite cool. I thought the song was okay, but perhaps not as catchy as some of the other RuPaul songs that we've heard. The next skit was the Queen Network News, which was a mandatory meeting and Dawn playing news anchors number 1 and 2. I thought they both did pretty well in this skit. I did feel that Amanda's performance was slightly funnier than Dawn's because Amanda was really leaning into the campiness of the role, and I really thought she amped up her character's energy. Q then came into the skit and was playing the role of the first brick of Stonewall. Just in case anyone doesn't know, in June of 1969, the police raided an LGBT+ bar called the Stonewall Inn in New York City, which was very common at the time as the laws were very anti-LGBT. And a riot broke out between the patrons of this bar and the police, and people started throwing things at the police such as bottles and bricks. And this riot was seen as one of the major catalysts that started the gay liberation movement in the US. And for years, people have been debating who threw the first brick at Stonewall, or in other words, who helped to start this riot that eventually led to LGBT+ rights liberation movement. But over the years, there have been conflicting stories as to who it was who actually threw the first brick and whether that's actually what happened. Anyway, back to the skit. I thought that it was a really fun character to have someone play an actual brick from Stonewall, so this was a really cool concept. And I think Q did really well and her performance was really funny, and I thought it was good that she gave the brick a funny personality, and it was something unexpected that I really enjoyed. And the final skit was called Holidays with the Barbara Shop Quartet, which involved Plasma, Nymphia Wind and Saphira Crystal doing a parody of Barbra Streisand in the style of a barbershop quartet. I thought all three of the queens did well in this and they all captured some essence of Barbra Streisand, but I think Plasma was clearly the standout of the group and really nailed a lot of Barbara's mannerisms, and you can tell that Plasma is a real fan of Barbara and therefore she knew all of the references. Okay, so we're now moving on to the runway for this week, and the theme was Everything, Every Cher All at Once. So it was basically a look inspired by the singer Cher. But as usual, I won't be critiquing the actual fashion of the outfits because I wouldn't know fashion sense if it came up and slapped me in the face, so it's just not really something that I think I can talk about. So I'll just go through the outfits in order in which they appeared. So we had Xunami Muse as Cher, the Prisoner 1979. Morphine Love Dion as Cher at the Academy Awards 1988. Maya Iman LePage as Cher promoting the movie Burlesque 2010. Geneva Carr as Cher as Ringling Brothers Ringmaster 1974. Mirage as Cher in Concert 1979. Megami as Cher Turn Back Time 2009. Plain Jane as Cher at the 1974 Met Gala. A Mandatory Meeting as The Cher Doll 2001. Dawn as Mod Cher 1976. Q as Cher from the Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour 1973. Plasma as Cher at the 1985 Met Gala. Nymphia Wind as Cher the Egyptian Goddess 1979. And then Saphira Crystal as Cher Vegas Residency 2017. We then find out that neither Plain Jane nor Saphira Crystal are going to use their immunity potions. And the tops for this week were Q, Plain Jane and Plasma, with Plasma ultimately winning. And when Plasma was announced as the winner, we saw Q with a slight face crack, which I think is the narrative that they're trying to set up, similar to Jan, because Q has come so close to winning 3 times in a row now. And then the bottom 3 were Mirage, Geneva Carr and Maya Iman LePage. Maya was ultimately called safe and Geneva and Mirage lip-synced, with Mirage unfortunately being told to sashay away. The lip sync and the elimination were definitely very controversial this week, and in the comments from the poll this was heavily featured, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But Mirage unfortunately didn't know the words to the song, and we've seen on Drag Race before that if a queen doesn't know the words to the lip sync song, they always get eliminated. And you could see on RuPaul's face that she was not impressed during the lip sync that Mirage didn't know the lyrics, so I thought it was kind of not that surprising that Mirage was eliminated. It was very emotional though, because Mirage broke down on stage when she was eliminated and you could tell that she was just so crushed. And this has led to a wider debate of whether Mirage should have been in the bottoms to start with, or whether the producers deliberately put Mirage in the bottom because Mirage had said in Untucked that she didn't know the words. But we'll talk more about that in a minute. And so this leads us nicely to the result of this week's Have Your Say poll. So question 1 was, do you agree with the outcome of this week's episodes, i.e. the tops, bottoms and elimination? And we had 34.5% yes and 65.5% no. So clearly the majority of people did not agree with the outcome of this episode, which is perhaps hardly surprising because of Mirage's really controversial elimination. Question 2 was, in your opinion, who should have won this week? And we had 68.2% for Plasma. And I think this does make sense because Plasma did really well in her performance and her Barbra Streisand was really spot on. We then had Q, 19.6%, which again I think is very justified because Q did really well as the brick. And then we had Plain Jane as 7.1%, which again I do agree with because I think Jane was actually one of the funnier characters this week. Question 3 was, in your opinion, who should have been eliminated this week? And we had 48.9% Geneva Carr. And I think perhaps this is because Geneva was in the bottom last week and she did also get critiques this week for her challenge performance not necessarily being the best. But then we also had 22.9% for Mirage, and maybe people felt that she should be eliminated because she didn't know the lyrics to the song, although some people were also saying that she shouldn't have been in the bottom to begin with. But it does look like a significant proportion did actually agree with her elimination. And then we also had Maya Iman LePage with 20.8%. And I do think actually Maya did pretty well this week, so I think although she perhaps did get some critiques from the judges, and we've seen this narrative that she's very timid and shy, I do think this week she came out of her shell. So in my opinion, I actually quite liked her performance, and I thought she was definitely not deserving of being in the bottom. Question 4 was, in your opinion, who was the best in the challenge this week? And again, unsurprisingly, we had 69.5% for Plasma, 17% for Q, and 6.5% for Plain Jane. So again, I think this does track. This also aligns with probably who did the best in the challenge and who got the best critique, so this isn't really much of a surprise. Question 5 was, in your opinion, who had the best runway look this week? And this vote was actually very split for once. So we had Q with 31.7%, Plain Jane with 26.3%, Saphira Crystal with 15.5%, and Nymphia Wind with 11.5%. So this was actually quite split compared to a lot of the other votes, which usually are very heavily towards one particular person. But I do agree, I thought Q looked amazing. Her outfit was incredible. I think actually every single contestant really turned it this week. I don't think there was a bad outfit, so this was a very hard decision for me. I thought they all looked great. And question 6 was, in your opinion, who is the front runner of the season so far, i.e. who is most likely to win? And we had Nymphia Wind with 52.4%. And I think this does make sense because Nymphia has been really good so far. She's also won a challenge. She won last week. So I can see why she's being seen as the front runner. Although in this particular episode, I feel like she wasn't necessarily that heavily featured. We then had Saphira Crystal with 21%, Q with 16.8%, and Plain Jane with 7.1%. And I do think this makes sense because Nymphia, Saphira, and Plain Jane all have one win, and Q has been in the top and almost won every single week. So it does make sense for all of those four to be seen as being the kind of front runners for the season. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the comments for this week in the poll. As you can imagine, it was very, very heavily slanted towards Mirage's elimination, with many people saying that Mirage was robbed and they were really sad that she was eliminated. And a lot of people, as I was saying, said that she shouldn't have been in the bottom two in the first place. And my Patreon Amy said, I'm so sad that Mirage is gone. There was just something so appealing about her in and out of drag, and I saw her as a diamond in the rough. Maybe in a couple of years she'll have had a chance to elevate her drag a little. I'm very hopeful we'll get to see her on All Stars soon. And one of my YouTube members at Carrie Colby said, people give all this bleep to Geneva trying to defend Mirage even though she didn't know the words in a lip sync. Let them both breathe and get over it. Also, the challenge was really nothing memorable or something to gag over. Very boring, excluding Plasma, Saphira and the Nymphia part. And just in case you don't know, this is because Geneva has apparently been receiving a lot of hate since the elimination of Mirage. And Mirage actually tweeted about this and said, and babes, Geneva is my sister, don't be hateful, take all that energy and stream my song instead. And Xunami Muse also tweeted about this and said, I get that sometimes we get attached to people from the show. Whether you agree or disagree with the outcomes, there is absolutely no need to be sending Geneva hate. How classless are you all? It's a competition, both of them are so cool with each other too, y'all need to chill. And yeah, this is a great opportunity to remind people that it is never okay to send hate to the queens, especially in a situation like this where the queen involved is in no way responsible for someone's elimination. Just watch the show and enjoy it, and please don't be hateful to the queens, it's really not cool. And I was really personally sad that Mirage left. I did really like her, I thought she was so fun and her talent show number was so good. And I did see recently that her talent show song has actually been streamed so many times that she's now in one of the top 10, I believe, queens who've had their songs from the talent show streamed on platforms such as Spotify and things like that. So I'm really glad that people are getting behind Mirage because she really was a fantastic competitor. Okay, so now we're going to move on to a little bit of drama this week involving Plasma and something that she said in last week's Untucked. So in last week's Untucked, it was the first time that the entire cast of season 16 were all together in Untucked, so they did a toast. And Plasma said, quote, no more being a local girl. And this is often a joke that we've heard on Drag Race of queens being called local girls before they get on Drag Race, which then catapults them into the spotlight. But a Twitter user who has since deleted their tweet, who I believe is a drag queen themselves, tweeted this clip of Plasma saying this and said, this was really weird lol, no more being a local girl, okay see y'all when you get booked at the bar with us. They then followed this up by saying that they weren't being shady to any of the queens, they were just making the point that a lot of queens think that Drag Race is the golden ticket to success, but many of the Drag Race queens still end up back at their old bars after Drag Race and they're still local girls. And this sparked a really big debate online in the comments, which I'm not sure was the Twitter user's original intention. But a lot of people were saying that the term local queen is often used as an insult about queens who have not been on Drag Race, and it implies as though they aren't as successful as Drag Race queens because they're just local. And we've heard RuPaul and the judges use this term on Drag Race as well. And in general, people were quite split on the issue, with some people criticising Plasma and saying that what she said came off as offensive, and this included some Drag Race queens. But a lot of people defended Plasma and said that she clearly meant this as a joke and it wasn't meant to be derogatory towards anybody. And some people even suggested that Plasma may have been making a joke in reference to something that Selena Estiti said during season 15 during the acting challenge when her character died, and she said, "I died a local girl." Plasma did then respond to the situation and tweeted saying, "Hi y'all, watching Untucked back and fully hearing how my toast sounds derogatory towards local performers. Totally not how I feel. I would be nothing without the NYC drag community, and I apologise if my words came across as a slight to any performer anywhere. Much love." And in the comments, most people did support Plasma and said that it was clearly not her intention to be rude, and the Twitter user who originally tweeted the tweet about Plasma has since deleted the tweet and said that although they stand by what they said, their tweet wasn't meant to be taken so seriously and that everyone should just be cool. And this is a good point, that often tweets and other things can get taken out of context and it's never an excuse to send hate to the queens. Drag Race is supposed to be a fun, light-hearted TV show, and there's a difference between light-hearted drama and just being mean to the queens. There was also a funny, jokey interaction between Monét X Change and Xunami Muse this week. Q tweeted a video of her performing in her Judy Garland dress from last week's ball. And Monét then commented on the tweet and said, "B, I want to purchase this gown from you, what's your price?" And Xunami Muse commented and said, "It's not four-way stretch." To which Monét responded saying, "Touché, here's a real stretch though, you thinking you're gonna win this season." And Xunami commented with a gif of a woman laughing and falling off her chair, and Monét commented with a laughing and kiss emoji. So this was clearly a jokey exchange between the queens and wasn't meant seriously, but I thought that it was funny, which is why I'm including it in this video. So there you go, there was my Have Your Say video for season 16 episode 4. Let me know in the comments if you agreed with the outcome of this week's episode, and did you also agree with the outcome of this poll? Thanks again for watching, and I hope you'll join me again in future videos. Thank you, bye! And I'd like to give a shout out to all of my amazing Patreon members, including my newest member, Lisa, who joined in the You're a Winner Baby tier. Thank you so much for all of your incredible support. It really does mean so much to me. And in the You're a Winner Baby tier, we have Christian, Emerald1508, Ethan, Lisa, PC Smush, and Rochelle. And in the Shantae You Stay tier, we have Amy, Becky, Charlie, David, JJ, Kylie, Linda, and Craig. Thank you so much to my patrons, you're all incredible and your support really does make such a difference to my channel, so thank you so much for being part of my community. And if you'd like to get early access to my videos such as this one, as well as a raft of other benefits, please consider joining my Patreon and supporting my channel, and I'll put a link in the description. Please make sure you like, comment and share this video as it really helps support my channel. And of course, please make sure you hit the subscribe button to stay up to date about new uploads. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you'll join me again in future videos. Thank you, bye!